Hi, I'm RC Jim. Well, you may be a guy like me who was started on the old radios where you had very limited capabilities in terms of automatic type features. Or you might be just starting out and you might be all excited about those automatic features. But either way, you might want to have a look at some of the things that are available nowadays, especially in the area of stabilization. And so for the next few videos, what I'm going to be doing is looking at some receivers that have automatic stabilization, how you set them up, and well, for today's video, in actual fact, having a look at how you unlock a AR636A, which is the Spektrum receiver that often gets shipped with a plane that includes the receiver, but the receiver is configured only for that one plane. But we'll be showing you today how to get in there, make some adjustments, and perhaps use it for some future use. So, have a watch, and I think you'll find it interesting. Somewhere along the way, I acquired this Spektrum AR636A with an airplane. And I'm not sure if it came with this PITS or whether it came with something else. But at the time, I didn't particularly pay too much attention to it because I'm just simply flying planes without stabilization and not worrying about it. But here lately, I've acquired an EDF, well, a couple of EDFs and some other things that I think it'd be good to have stabilization on. And so now I'm digging into it and looking into it further. So the first thing I thought we'd have a look at is taking an old receiver like this AR636A and seeing what we can do to program it. Now, the very first thing that happens when you go to program a receiver like that is that you realize that even your NX6 with its forward programming, it doesn't recognize it. It doesn't recognize a compatible receiver. And that's because the thing is locked. And of course, if you got an old DX6E or something like that, it doesn't even have the forward programming. So what do? Well, you grab yourself one of these. Now what this is a Spektrum AS3X receiver USB interface. So it's just a cable. It plugs into the bind port on that particular receiver, and they will have a designation on there along with the bind to tell you that that's where it goes. And you plug it into your PC. But then you have to run some software with it. And if you get the instructions and you have a look there at what it tells you go there and you get a 404 error. Really nice graphic with some, the 404 flashing on and off on the transmitter. But nonetheless, it goes nowhere. So you need to have the right place to go. So what do you do to find the software? Well, the simplest thing to do is to go to the Spektrum website, SpektrumRC.com, and rather than the horrendous search facility, well, the search facility works, but the easiest thing is you search for the part number. So it's a SPMA 3065, PMA 3065, okay. And there we got a transmitter receiver programming cable. Okay, so that's the cable that you need. And of course you can order that either directly from Spektrum or you can get it from somebody else. But the key thing that you need is the software for it. And down here on this PC download, that's your software. So as you click on that, it's going to give you this software here. And that's what you need to be able to make adjustments to the AR636A. And of course, it can also be used with the ones that are unlocked as well. But for a locked one, that's what you have to do. Or if you're working with any of them and you've got an older radio that doesn't have the forward programming in it, then you've got to program it with this. Now, there's more surprises as we go along. You take your cable here, you plug it into your PC, you plug it into the thing, but what you can't, well, what mine didn't allow me to do, I first off plugged it in there, I put just a power supply onto it to give it power, and with that I didn't click this power cable thing, so I gave it my own power, and it didn't recognize it. So then I disconnected my power supply and clicked the box and tried connecting it, and it didn't recognize it. But then I remembered that with a Lemon RC stabilized receiver, I was having similar problems trying to get the thing to connect and, you know, cooperate with me. And I had to have all of the servos unplugged because apparently there was some sort of electronic interference with the interactions that took place with the servos that kept it from being recognized. So I unplugged all the servos, had no power to it, plugged in the cable, ticked the power cable button, and voila, it was recognized. So let's go through that process now and show you what's involved in using the software. Okay, let's have a look at how to use the software. Well, we've downloaded the program, the Spektrum Programmer. Let's put a little icon on our desktop for us, so we double click on that. And here we're looking at the receiver that I've already got in there. But if you were coming here for the first time, you wouldn't have all of this. But what you've got to do is log in. So right now I'm logged in, so let's log out. Okay, so I go up here and you click the login button up in the corner. It then asks you for your username and password. Now this is your, what do they call it, a My account or whatever, My Spektrum I think it's called. So with Spektrum, where you have registered products and things like that you've purchased, it's the login that you have for that part of it. So you've got a username and a password. If you don't have an account already with Spektrum, you can create an account and go through there. But if you've got one already, then you type in what you need. Pardon the back, and I didn't want you to get my account. Okay, and log in. Okay, so being logged in, you then need to have your receiver connected. Now, this isn't the one that we're working with on that particular plane. This is a newer one, an AR630. But just showing you being plugged in, and as we mentioned before, in the bind program sort of port, just above the number 1. That's where we get it plugged in, dark cable to the bottom like normal. So that's plugged in. It's plugged into a USB port on the computer. And when you first go to connect it, given that you don't have a battery plugged in here, you pick the power cable thing up here. And actually I've got to plug this in. I've unplugged it. So I now take the USB and I plug it into the USB port over here. Okay, when I do that, it says cable connected but no device, and that's because this isn't powered yet. So I click on the power cable thing over here, and that connects it. It says make sure that you don't have another battery connected to it. Yeah, that's all fine. So now it selects the model, and it brings up the ones that I've got in there. Now, if this was the first time, and if you hadn't registered this particular thing yet, you would have to register it. So it would come up here with what the serial number is for it, and it asks, do you want to add it, and so forth. So you just go through whatever it asks you, and I forget all the details now, but, you know, just follow your nose through that process, and you'll get it all registered and up there. Then for any of them, you got the software update, and it'll tell you whether there's a newer version available for you. With this particular one, I've already updated it, but it is brand new. I mean, I bought this, a month ago or something like that, and it wasn't up to date when I checked it the other day. So if you have a newer version that's available, it'll offer that there, and it'll give you a button to press to upload that firmware. And so that's already been done for this. Then with these newer receivers like this one, it doesn't give you anything else as an option. So what you need to do is you first off need to disconnect this one, because right now it's only showing us models. I'll go over here to models on the menu, and it's only showing us AR630 receivers. So that's what that one is. But if we disconnect the power to it, or we unplugged it, whatever, and then we click on models again, now we see everything that's in there. So we've got these 636s as well as the 630s. So the pits is what we're working on. So I can double click that, or I can go over here and just click the select. And now, voila, we've got all of our forward programming type options. So we can do a great variety of things. You can set exponential and dual rates, but as you do that, well, you don't want to do that. These things would just add on top of whatever you've already got set in your radio. So if you've already got dual rates and exponential set in your radio, it's already going to be cutting down the rates, and it's going to be adding in the exponential. This would just be adding that on top of that. So if, say, on the dual rates you had a rate of, say, 60%, and you put another 60% in here, you get 60% of 60% or 36% output instead of the 60. So just leave these on 0, leave the dual rates on 100. You do note in here you do have roll, pitch, and yaw, so you could click on the tabs up there to make settings for each one and all of that, but don't do it. What you do want to do is look at gain and priority. So this has to do with your stabilization. So again, you got roll, pitch, and yaw, 3 tabs up at the top, and each time you take a tab, then the whole set underneath applies to that particular thing. You got flight mode 1, flight mode 2, and flight mode 3. So in this particular case, I've set flight mode 1 to be nothing as far as stabilization is concerned. And the reason for that is I want to have one that's unaffected, to where if everything goes wrong, I can just simply turn the thing off. Okay, so I have that as my flight mode 1. Flight mode 2, I put in something that, you know, is around the figures that they kind of recommend, 50-60%, something like that, as far as the rate is concerned, and 160% on the priority. Now, the 50% has to do with how much of a response you're going to get on the control surface to a fluctuation from the wind. So how hard it's going to respond to that. And of course, if it goes too high, then you can get into an oscillation type thing that you want to avoid. So that's what that is that there. The priority is how it gets changed as the control stick moves away from center. So this graph over here is stick position left and right, and gain up and down. And so you've got that full 50% that I've got set there when the stick is right in the middle. But as the stick moves away from the center very rapidly, the gain is reduced right down to 0 when the stick is, you know, maybe a little over a third of the way to the side. Now the reason for that is that you don't want the stabilization to be fighting you when you're doing a significant set of maneuver, and even just a turn. Perhaps you've flown a plane that has a safe mode, and if it's in the safe mode, to try and get the thing to turn and come back to you if it's going away, it can be quite a challenge. You put the stick all the way over and just slowly coming around, you know. So with the stabilization, you don't want to be having the thing fight you. What you want is to steady things out when things are going along sort of normal-like, and that's where the sticks are around the middle. And when you're moving the stick way over, you want that plane to move. You know, you don't want the stabilization to be fighting it. So that's what's going on there. 160% is what's commonly referred to as what people are comfortable with. One fellow I've seen has suggested 170%, but obviously that's to personal taste. So anyway, this first one, the 50%, is around about what people normally figure would be required. But with this particular plane, I'm getting very little response to moving the thing. and I'm thinking it needs everything it can get. And so I've got another one here, it's at 100%. And there's two reasons for that. One is I think it might need it. But two, I've got to be able to check the direction that the response is in. And down here at the 50%, you can't hardly see or even feel the thing, you know. This particular plane, this particular receiver, you know. But anyway, I'm having a really hard time. So by putting it up at 100%, then that's something I can see and I can feel and I can know what's going on. So that's why I put that at 100. So you set those for roll, pitch, and yaw. Roll and pitch will typically be slightly lower than the yaw, so you can see that on pitch I've got that also at 50%, but on yaw I've moved it up to 60%. Again, you can do what you see fit there. Now you notice here that we've also got some additional things in here. We've got a heading, and we've got this absolute and relative. Heading has to do with keeping the plane on a given heading. And in general, you don't need that. You got roll, pitch, and yaw to handle all of the bumps and jiggles and things like that. The only thing that you might want to use the heading for is that if you had it on a switch where when you're getting ready to land and you're all lined up with the runway, you flick on the heading to try and maintain that heading, you know, down to the runway. Maybe that might do something. I don't really know, but what I do know is that most people don't bother with it, and they talk about having issues with it when they have set it. Obviously, if you got the heading setting, it might be rather difficult to change heading if you wanted to. So that's that one. Now, the absolute and relative have to do with the gain. Absolute gain means that you don't have a dial to be able to adjust it. It's just simply whatever you set it here is what you get. When you do the forward programming with the transmitters, that works quite well, and it gives you a reasonable sort of rate. I really am wondering on this particular receiver rate here, in that I'm getting so little control response with what is being provided. I'm wondering if that is really giving me a nominal sort of base rate to go on. When you see the Lemon RX that we'll be doing another video on here shortly, with that one I had problems at first with it, just not hardly moving the control surfaces at all. And it turned out to be related to the fact that I didn't have a gain channel applied to it. And it just had just next to nothing in terms of the overall gain that was being worked with. So I'm kind of suspecting that maybe something like that is happening here. And when we do the next video on this one, where I use the Radiomaster 16-channel radio, and I actually have a dial to affect the gain on this, we will see whether or not that makes a dramatic difference. But for the moment, using the 7-channel radio, the best that we can do is pick the absolute one, where you just have a fixed amount of gain. That is what we specify here. But if you did have the radio with the channel 8 to be able to adjust the gain, and with a knob on that channel, then we would pick the relative values in there. Mixing, again, don't worry about it in here. You can do that in the radio. Given that it's so difficult to work with the software, having to have your receiver, you know, without the servos plugged in and so forth, you know, just leave as much as you can for the radio, where it's going to be much easier to change it. Okay, initial setup, you've got the receiver orientation, so that's how it's setting in the plane. So obviously you just click the little arrows to get the thing to change to different positions, and it can flip either way. With these old receivers, it has to be longitudinal in orientation, but the antenna can either be to the back or to the front. And it can be in any one of those 4 positions for each of those general orientations. Flight mode switch is what is going to be used to select the modes that we have in here. And these modes can be totally independent from your normal flight modes. I set them up on a separate switch so that I can my flight modes where I'm controlling rates and expo, that sort of thing. I have that on one switch. A separate switch I've got for stabilization, because to me they're two separate independent items. So anyway, I've set it up to auxiliary 2, which on my NX6 I've got on channel 7. And yes, the NX6 does have that 7th channel, especially for that purpose. The aircraft type is just what type of wing and what type of tail it's got. So it's not how many servos you've got, but it's how many servo connections to the receiver there are. So with the ailerons, if you've got a Y harness and one connection to the receiver, then that's this type of situation. And same sort of thing with the tail. You know, it might have two servos for the two sides of the elevator, but if they have a Y harness and they're plugged into one port on the receiver, then it's like that single servo. So you'd be familiar with these sorts of things with tail type. So just set what you've got. Surface setup, you can then click on a surface, and the biggest thing here is this is where you reverse the response. So when you go to test it, if it's going in the wrong way, come back in here and reverse it. The rest of it, you don't really need to worry about too much. It's not likely that you're going to be changing the sub-trim. The plus and the minus most likely are going to be linked together, so that stays the same. And this balance has to do if you've got a situation where you got two separate channels for ailerons or something like that, and you need to do some sort of balance between them, then this has to do with that. So again, not likely that you're going to be doing anything with it, but the reverse thing is an important deal. So to change any of those, you just click on the surface that you're wanting to change, and you can change it appropriately. Port assignment just shows you how the channels are set up. So I've got landing gear and flaps available for 5 and 6. This particular plane doesn't have those, but I like to be consistent, so I leave those available for that. Auxiliary 2, I don't have to assign it to anything here because I've already specified it previously. And on the failsafe, you've got a choice of preset or hold, and with some receivers you'll also have a safe option over here. So the failsafe is what happens if the receiver stops receiving a signal from the transmitter, then goes into failsafe mode. And so the throttle, typically that'll be at preset, you know, pull it down to nothing. Aileron, elevator, and rudder, if you have them on preset, then it's going to set them back at the settings that they were at when it was bound. So when you bind it, say if you want to give it a little bit of rudder to have it turn if the thing loses signal, you can have that rudder just over a tiny bit when you bind it, and that will put that into the preset for the failsafe. Otherwise, hold would just simply hold the last position that it had when it was flying under control, which is fine if it was going along normally, but if you're in some sort of crazy maneuver, then that might be a bit of a problem. So anyway, you have your choice there. And of course the gear and the auxiliary channel, the gear and the flaps, you could put them as you see fit. Okay, so that's basically it as far as using the software with the receiver. Quite simple, but the thing is, after you've got this initially set up, you need to put the receiver back into the plane, check it out, and see about the directions of travel to make sure that they're what you want. Now that you've set up everything in the computer and you've got your orientation set as to how the receiver is in there, you now need to plug in all of your servos back in, get the power on it, well, fire up your transmitter, get the power on it, and then see what's happening. So we've got our stabilization settings over here. It's totally off when it's up, and of course nothing is happening there. And then we got stabilization on for the next two positions, but it's the bottom position there that we have the maximum amount where we gave it 100%. And You would think it'd be really obvious, but it can be hard to see which way it's going. So you might want to put your finger on the control surface next to something else. But in this actual fact, it's going the opposite way. What should be happening is when I lift this wing, it should go up. When I lift the tail, the elevator should go up. If I have it sideways like this, and I lift it this way, the rudder should go up. So that's the sort of thing that you're looking for. So in this particular case, I lift it, and it just goes down very slightly. Now what amazes me is that is set on 100%, and I've got some pretty high throws in there in terms of the, what the radio is doing. So I'm a bit baffled that, that is all it moves, but that's what it is for this particular one anyway. And of course, on this particular one, because we got the 6-channel radio, we have not set any gains. So if we had gains, we could crank up the gain, maybe get a little bit more out of it. But with a 6-channel radio or 7-channel, which is what that's actually got, you can't set the gains. Okay, at least not without a dial. If I had a dial, I could use the flap channel and use the gains there, I suppose, but I don't have any dials on there. Okay, so anyway, this one's going backwards. So I lift it, it goes up, so aileron's going backwards. Tail, that's going the correct way. I lift it up and it raises slightly. That one I can't even hardly feel, but if I look at this end of it out here, I can see when I go up, it just goes up very, very slightly. So elevator is okay, and rudder, certainly wagging. That's a tough one. It's so hard to tell. That's going backwards. Okay, so I need to reverse the rudder and the ailerons in the software, and to do that I've got to unplug all of the servos again, hook it up to the PC, and turn it back around. Okay, so that's a AR636A, programming it with the programming software and using the programming cable. Well, I hope that's been helpful to you. Next, we're going to get into programming this AR636A with a 8-channel or better transmitter. Following that, we're going to be doing some work both with the Lemon RX receivers as well as a Spektrum AR630. And with those, we'll be having a look at this FA18 up here and see what we can do with that with some stabilization. So, if you haven't done so yet, subscribe. That will help you keep all this stuff handy. And then also have a look at some of our other videos on our channel, and even check out the website, rcgym.com. You'll find a lot of helpful things there. You have a great day, and happy flying.